Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop, and today we're going back to the Bronze Age. Now, but before we dive into this, I have to tell you the backstory. When I went to the MWTCA National Meet last fall, Jim was there giving a talk on Bronze Age tools. Really kind of fascinating. Unfortunately, I was not able to video it, and I really wanted to because it was a fascinating talk with some really cool information, and I just wish I had my camera. Thankfully though, he decided to do the same presentation again at a local MWTCA meet in Iowa this last weekend, and I made sure I brought the equipment and got this on video, and it's just, well, you'll see. Now, it starts off with a little bit of backstory for him and how he got into archaeology, but then it goes into the tools. And if you want to jump around and see what all is being talked about, there are timestamps down below and you can see the whole talk down there. So without talking anymore, let's actually get into the presentation.
This is Jim Price. I don't think he needs much of an introduction. Today's program is going to be on Bronze Age tools, and I'm really looking forward to hearing it.
I've been around in Midwest Tools since day one. I was at the University of Missouri in Columbia and had a bunch of tools that I bought at the fairgrounds. I had a flea market every Saturday morning, and I turned around the corner and a guy said, "You like old tools, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'm Marion Henley." And Marion Henley was one of the founders, the 14 founders of the organization. He said, "Let's go to Dundee, Illinois." Said, "We're having a meeting and organizing this group. We're going to call it Midwest Tool Collectors Association." He said, "Go with me." Well, I couldn't. But he brought the membership form back and gave me one. And so I'm not a charter member. The only charter members are the 14 guys that were at Dundee. But I've been in Midwest Tool the whole time. I've always had an interest in technology, because I grew up in the Ozark Highland. I've given programs here on the Ozark people and their tools and all that sort of thing. But I saw a lot of these tools used as a child. My dad was an expert axeman, beyond belief of what he could do with an axe. And we built houses, and my dad built lots of log cabins for rich people, or who came from St. Louis to Chicago and bought property down on Current River and Jack's Fork, and they would want a log cabin and escape kind of resort kind of thing, and he built 2 or 3 of those. So I grew up in the folk culture with a Scotch-Irish origin, with the Old English language, a lot of vestiges of the old language. And I always had an interest in, people, culture, folk ways, and so on. And when I was a kid, I wanted to be an archaeologist. And so I found out when I was about 10 that you had to have a degree in anthropology to be an archaeologist. So I started working on historic Osage sites in the 1960s with the University of Missouri, Columbia, when I was in high school, and then enrolled in the University of Missouri. And there was only one class that really had much to do with technology, and it was Dr. R.F.G. Spear. And Chester Spear, who's a member of Midwest Tool, and so on, is his nephew. And we've raked up a lot of connections, and he lives down in, I think, Texas. And he's on Facebook a lot and other groups. But to this day, there are no classes taught in America on old tools. I don't know why. It's always interested me. I've always been fascinated by it. I became an archaeologist. I got my undergraduate degree at Missouri, and then I went to University of Michigan. My old professor had his doctorate from Michigan, and he wanted me to go to Ann Arbor. So I went and became an archaeologist. Got my doctorate in '73. Got it approved, my dissertation, and I worked for Southwest Missouri State University, which is the now Missouri University, and taught Ozark culture, a lot of it continuing education at West Plains, Missouri, teaching everybody from teenagers to old people about the Ozarks and the people and the culture and all of that, origins and so on. But I still don't understand in academia. I mean, all of these tools, and you guys, everybody like in Midwest Tool and EAI and so on, are the only people preserving vast quantities of the past technology. The Smithsonian doesn't have much. And something like, there's various museums that come and go. Big collections are assembled in just a museum and then it goes away. The Henry Mercer Museum is about the only one in Shelburne and Williamsburg and so on. They paid quite a bit of attention to the past technology. But generally, the public doesn't care. And it's not a, I don't understand why we don't have we have a Museum of History and Technology on the Mall in Washington. But I don't know why that we don't have, programs in colleges where you can get a doctorate in past technology or whatever. It just doesn't exist. And apparently, it's not a problem for the politicians, But stop and think about it. You guys are the only ones who carry this stuff forward. And I've been in it now 3 generations, and you see the collections move, and everybody, the stuff is passed down and taken care of. But there's no major museum that does that, and certainly universities are not involved in it at all, and it should be, in my opinion. But during I've always had a fascination for archaeology, and I had a career of 52 years and ended up from the University of Missouri to the National Park Service. The last 11 years of my career was with the Park Service, and Russ and I worked together. And I ruined him and got him on the Silver Slope. And Nick Hesley back there, he was my first apprentice in the Ozark folk programs. And I was I'm a master joiner using 18th century technology and so on to build furniture. And Nick made a beautiful tool chest under the apprenticeship program. And then like I said, was an archaeologist for 52 years, a North American archaeologist. And I worked primarily in only 18 counties of Missouri. But I always had an interest in the old world. I took classes on peoples of Africa and the peoples of Asia and peoples of Great Britain and so on, and, typical college curriculum. But technology didn't enter into it much. It was all wars, political history, kings, queens, emperors. That's what history is to historians. And the very base kind of way that a peasant survived out on the landscape is really not considered much in history books. So during I retired in 2011, and the pandemic hit, COVID-19, and I thought, well, I'm not going to go out. I'm going to isolate myself because I was in my 70s. I'm 80 years old now, and I thought, well, what do I really want to do? And I've always been fascinated with the Bronze Age in Europe and the British Isles, and so I said, I'm just going to learn all I can about the Bronze Age and make up a lot of the tools and experiment with them and figure out how they were used and so on. And I based my research and so on 2 major archaeological sites you may want to look up on the internet and read about. And one of them is Flag Fen. flagpin, and the other one is must farm, M-U-S-T farm. And a lot of what I researched was the tools that were found in those contexts. Now at Flag Fin, there was a big causeway that Bronze Age people built that took about 500,000 trees to build. And they built it over a period of time, of course, and they even repaired it. And they worked with green wood, and that's important, I think, in use of these tools, is that the wood needs to be worked green for it to really effectively, cut. Now, prior to the Bronze Age, and we go clear back, hominids like us, we're Homo sapien now, but hominids go back about 3.5 million years. And for about 2 million years, there was only one tool, and it's a hand axe, or a chopping-like tool. There was a hand axe, nothing else. And then the toolkits became more and more elaborate, and about 40,000 years ago is when we, as Homo sapiens, really took off, and Neanderthals are running mates. And they were Neanderthals, and all of you have Neanderthal blood in you, every one of you. And it's probably 1% or less. I'm 2%. But we come on down from I'm talking about the lower Paleolithic. Now, can you imagine that going for 1 million years and the tools don't change? Or 1.5 million years. Nothing changes. And even in North America, in the late Paleo-Indian period, that would be about 13,000 down to about 10,000 BC, the projectile points, or actually atlatl darts, but people would call them an arrowhead, but they're really a dart. For 2,000 years, nothing changed. They kept, making exactly the same kind of tools in a fairly elaborate toolkits of burins and scrapers and various tools and a particular kind of point. But can you imagine going for 2,000 years and you make the same thing on and on and on? And in the old world, really, the Roman Empire, and we'll be talking about that, when iron came in, but in the Roman Empire was very sophisticated and so on. And it crashed, and we went through 1,000 years of the Dark Ages. And nothing changed much. But going on back, so you have your lower Paleolithic, your upper Paleolithic, and then the Neolithic. And the Neolithic is when Stonehenge was built. And they did that with stone tools. The Egyptians used stone tools in the early dynasties and so on. And it wasn't until about 7,000 or 5,500, about BC, or about 7,000 years ago, that somehow they figured out the copper. And that period is called the Chalcolithic, and it's the early metal age. Now that's a pure copper axe. This is an exact replica of the one that was on the belt of Otzi, the Iceman. And this is your first use of metal. And they probably discovered that copper melts at a fairly low temperature. They probably put copper ore in this cooking fire and figured out that the doggone stuff melted, and you got this substance that came out that was kind of neat stuff. Then, about 2300 BC, we got into bronze. And somehow they figured out that was a change, a major change. And that's why James and I have these shirts on that say, the alloy that gave rise to civilization, because this was the big push forward in advancement in all kinds of areas, in language and trade. it began in the Bronze Age. And I have here a piece of tin of 999%, 0.999 tin. And this is copper. And it's 90% copper, 10% tin. And you put these together and you get this. And it's hard. Is it? So during the Bronze Age, the basic tools, woodworking tools, that we know today and we enjoy on the tables here and take home with us and so on, that's when these, good axes, chisels, all that sort of thing was developed, was during the Bronze Age. And the Egyptians, during the age that later than Otzi, but in the early dynasties, they built pyramids with copper tools. Keep that in mind, is that the only thing they had was copper, and yet they were able to quarry stone, shape it, and build these monumental pyramids. It was during this, the Bronze Age, that all kinds of tools that we still enjoy today, like chisels, that's a piece of pure bronze, and it's sharp. You can come up and we'll let you use the axes and that sort of thing and get a feel for what it feels like. Because I'm a kind of a touchy-feely kind of guy that I have to know, I have to experience the use of the tool to really appreciate it. But razors were developed. This is for shaving. And these were knife blades as well as scythe blades. During the Bronze Age, they developed all kinds of agriculture. It started in the Neolithic, but then coming up, like I said, around 2300 BC, we were able to plant grain and domesticate the wild auroch, which was a cow that had really long horns, and they domesticated all of these different animals. And they were able to get the milk products and all that sort of thing from these, but they were lactose intolerant. And the lactose intolerant people today is carried through from that period. So they did other things. They could eat cheese, certain kinds of cheese and so on, but the livestock was used primarily for meat, and they had hogs, swine, and they could milk cows and then feed and fatten hogs on milk and whey and all that sort of thing. But the items that I took off on a tangent of a certain kind of tool that was found at Must Farm. Must Farm had about 6 houses. It's called the Pompeii of Europe because about 800 BC, there was a major fire in this. They were living on the backwaters from a river, and over the water, an estuary, you might say, on an old stream channel. And these houses caught on fire, whether they were attacked or whatever, they don't know. But this village burned and it fell into the water at Must Farm. And everything, contents of the houses went down and was essentially in the place they were in the house above. So they were able to work out activity areas where certain things were made, where certain foods were processed, where weaving was done, and all of those sorts of things. The metal was very scarce. It was, almost like magic. Metal was very valuable, the bronze. And so what you get is the tools are much smaller than we're accustomed to. Is the chisels, and this is an original here. Here's a chisel and a knife and so on. These are the originals. I mean, these actually Bronze Age people made this and used it, but everything is small compared to what we're used to. They developed axes, and it's not just an axe, it's a, and this is the exact replica of a handle found at Must's farm. But you can take that out. It was an axe. You can put it in this way, and it's an adze. They figured that out at least by 1500 BC. The particular axe that I concentrated on is called a palstave, P-A-L-S-T-A-V-E. And it, first of all, they continue to make like this in Otzi's time, is an exact replica of stone axes. They just moved from stone over to metal. It was in the Bronze Age that they developed this palstave. There were two kinds of axes. There were socketed axes. That's a socketed axe, and this is a palstave. And the palstave is a lot like they would have a stone tool. This is a whole new concept. It required a three-part mold. You had to have an upper part, the lower part, and a core that made the hollow part here. And they have these ear, eyes, handles, whatever on them. And people in the beginning, early archaeology, they thought that this was used to tie the, kind of like this, is to tie this eye up to here with a thong or cord or whatever. I don't think that is the case. I think this was just a means of carrying them on a piece of leather or a string or whatever. And these were worth a great deal of money or value. And they were used as money. They're found, thousands of them are found across Europe in caches, like where a merchant, somebody would bury these things and hopefully come back and get it, but he never did. So I think these were simply for carrying. And a lot of times I will put one lash through it. And it's not necessary to hold the head on. That head just wedges tighter and tighter as you use it. Now I do use an adhesive that they used, and it's birch bark tar, in which they burned or cooked green birch bark in a closed environment. It'd be an anaerobic environment, and created a tar, which is right up there with the modern epoxies. I mean, it's amazing stuff. And a lot of these axes are actually glued on the, and by the way, the Neanderthals used this, all the way back to Neanderthal time. But they use that for a glue to help hold these things on. But they'll hold on by themselves because they just keep wedging tighter and tighter and tighter. Archaeologists in Europe call these daggers, and one has not been found with a handle. I don't think they were daggers. They are the reamers that made the holes in these handles. And they're real scarce. You can actually make, and some of these holes I did with this. Now the odd thing is, you take a reamer from the 1880s, And it's an exact match. See? Exact. So I made a pattern of that angle. Yeah, Morse tapers are not from 1865. They knew about them, well, at least by 2000 BC, that they were using, had the concept of reaming a hole. And this works. Keep in mind they're using green wood. And green wood behaves a lot differently than seasoned wood. They made knives, look like that, and saw. And this is a replica. This is what the original saw looked like, found with the handle in a bog, and quite artistic, quite ergonomic too. I mean, it really fits the hand. And James's daughter sawed a log in two at Midwest Tool in Springfield at our meeting with this saw. So it cuts. They had no concept of the setting a tooth or setting the teeth on a saw, but they cut the teeth, and there's enough burrs on the side, and you expand the tooth enough that it cuts right through the wood, very easy. Now the advantage of the socketed axes is that you can make all sorts of tools with them. Put a long handle in it, becomes a barking spud. Like this, it can be a chisel. It can be all kinds of tools in one. And see how tight that is? I didn't glue that in, but you can't get it off. That taper is it's the same concept of the taper in the handle, is that it just keeps driving tighter and tighter and tighter. And so that's the way they held stuff on, or held the tool on the head. And they had hammers a lot like ours, like that. They made mallets, a couple of thousand BC. And also, these are hammers, or mallets, and they fit in there like that in the same handle that the axe fits in, and that also is an Adz or whatever. But yeah, you can drive stakes, do all kinds of things with that. They had elaborate houses all across Europe, Ireland all the way to England, the British Isles, Scotland, that were round. And the houses at Flag Fen, or the Muss Farm and Flag Fen, were round houses with thatched roofs, usually with 4 posts, and they would put a tree in the middle, or a long post with branches, and hold the thing up, and then take the tree out when they were done to support the roof of these thatched houses. I think that all the woodworking that the Bronze Age people did, the major detailed woodworking, was done astride of a log. I do that a lot with these tools, is sit astride of a log and work on the log ahead of you. That was the first workbench that, until the Roman times, and they developed a true workbench. An interesting aspect is that boxes came in the Upper Neolithic, but the Bronze Age people perfected a box. And this is my fire starting box. It has a fire iron, and that's really not, it's iron, but it's hard iron. You don't want just steel because it needs to take shavings off, and those shavings become sparks when you start a fire. And your fingers fit in here. There's all different styles of these, and these are not Bronze Age. We'll get to that. See? It's easy to start a fire with this, literally. Now, during the Bronze Age, they were using fire drills, and people say, that's a piece of cedar. Yes, it is, which is a resinous wood. But if you get the certain dry season cedar, eastern red cedar, without much rosin in it, you can actually make a nice fireboard with it. And of course, that's done with a bow drill. And I have a lot of replicas of drills. This is a replica of their pump drill. And I guess it was important for storage, for transport and stuff, to have the thing knocked down. But it goes like this. Let me get the, yep, it goes like this, comes down, jams. Then this goes over here, and it becomes a drill. And it works. Like that. So, you have that kind of drill, and these could be used either between the hands like this or with a bow, and put this in a socket like this. They used a lot of awls, and this is just you could bore holes just like our brad awls that we have. You could bore holes in wood with this, and they were doing all through prehistory and history. There was a lot of lacing of things, lacing of wood to make cradles, to make back cradles and so on. To carry babies, and a lot of it was done with just a simple brad awl, which is got a flat, sharp tip, and you just poke a hole through wood or leather or whatever to make. I forgot to show you this box as I made. That's my fire starter. But see, it comes around like this, and then this comes up and latches it. And I'm convinced that in a village that there are a bunch of handles. Keep in mind that these axes were like gold. And I think that people made handles and passed around the axe heads to fit them, to go in those handles. And I'm sure that on hand they kept a bunch of blanks or preforms to turn into some kind of a tool. We didn't talk. I'm not into reenactment or any kind of kinds of things you see on YouTube of swords, shields, all that kind of stuff. That was very unusual, used in warfare. A spear, not necessarily, because it was a staff, and you can, and I think they got the idea for those holes in here, the tapered hole, by reaming it with a spear, like that. Then they developed an actual reamer. And this is Irish, and it's right early Bronze Age, about 2300 BC. And I carry that 4 miles every day. And it's getting, nice and patinated and so on. But it's a lethal weapon. It's, you do all kinds of things with a spear. And feral dogs. Now up here, I have, that's an original sharpening stone, and I have a little one here. This is what they sharpened these things with. And the knife and so on is quite sharp. The reamer, that scythe blade, the razor, chisel, whatever. you get it a little bit dull, and you sharpen just like we do our steel tools today, is you sharpen them and they go right back to work. Okay, I'm going to talk about the next age, the Iron Age, and then we're going to do a little demonstration of the use of these palisados and socket axes. And then anybody that wants to get the feel for what it felt like, I mean, this is the real thing. These exact replicas of weight, length, very detailed, and feel what it's like to cut wood with a bronze axe or any of the other tools. Now, about 400 BC is when the Bronze Age ended and the Iron Age started. The iron was introduced out of the Roman Empire, which was beginning to flourish. And of course, England wasn't taken until 1st century BC, is when the big push to take England and even up Germany and France and so on. And it became part of the Roman Empire, and they built villas and so on all over. And London was a central place for the Romans. What they figured out, again, this metal was expensive. It was valuable. So the tools continued to be small, even in the Iron Age. Now, you read about the Celts in England and the Celtic Age and so on. These are the tools that were used by the Celts. And you read about the Druids, same period as the Druids and so on. And many of our fairy tales, by the way, like Grimm's fairy tales, Andersen fairy tales, and so on, actually date from the Bronze Age. It's oral history all the way up and finally recorded and written down. But like Hansel and Gretel and all of that kind of thing began back in the early days of metallurgy. These things are no longer, they convertible from adzes to axes. The adzes, and there's lots of adzes, but this is an adze, and this is an axe. And they're Celtic, and this would be like 400 BC to, after the Roman Empire came in. So they probably came on down to at least 400 AD that this kind of tool was used in the British Isles. Interesting enough, on eBay, they're still using these things over there. Same concept. These are see, there's a flange. They just create a flange and then a wedge-shaped handle like that. But this is a modern one, probably 19th century. But this came from Latvia. And they're still using the same concept to haft the tool and to use it. And this could be used, this one's sharpened on one side. It was an adze, but you could use it as an axe. This is the handle that this came in. This is modern in a sense, in that I got it off of eBay or Etsy, one or the other. And it's the same concept. This is a socket, like the socketed bronze, and this is a flange, tapered flange, like some of the palisados and so on that were used in the Bronze Age. But this is a very effective tool for bowl carving and hollowing and so on. Very, very nice. And the handles for the, let's see what I've got here. That will fit there. Yeah, that fits there. Still using the tapered concept. Now keep in mind, not all tools in the Bronze Age and the Iron Age were hafted, or were actually engaged in a hole. Some of them were like Outt's axe, in the handle. You couldn't turn the blade around, you couldn't make an adze out of it or whatever. But these things, I found out, can be used as an axe quite effectively, because you can turn it that way and trim down the side, square up a piece of wood or whatever. But you can also make things like barking spuds and chisels, hit it. Very versatile kind of tooling. This is another way during the Iron Age that they hafted tools, and that was knocked down. And you can buy these for $14.95 on Etsy. If you want to buy you an Iron Age axe and haft it and use it, which I love doing. So that goes together, and then you've got an axe. And you could turn this around on the socket and make an adze out of it, but this is an axe. I wanted to cover, and also during the Iron Age, is you got a lot more shapes. I make the heads for these, the actual blades, and that's made out of this leaf spring from a car, old car, and make chisels. And this is a gouge. But you'll see the shapes of modern or later tools like we used in our lifetime, or we can buy antique tools that use the same concepts for chisels, for axe heads, for adze heads, and so on. But these things are so simple that they're easy to make. Just get it white hot and just take a rectangular piece of iron and bend that flange. And then that handle will wedge right in there and stay. And there's no doubt that modern steel is a blessing for us, a bonus, because those that are made out of steel obviously are very sharp and so on compared to iron ones and compared to Bronze Age axes. Things didn't change until very much. Romans introduced socketed tools, ones with holes in it, like our modern picks and so on. But it wasn't until the Viking period, about 700 AD to 1100 AD, when the Vikings came out of Scandinavia and raided big areas and so on, that we developed the axes that put us on the path to the goose-wing axes, and this is a bearded axe and so on. But these, that's an interesting shape, and the folklore in Europe about the Vikings and these axes, and they're very common, well used. This one dates from about 1915, probably made out of a piece of grater blade, and it's arc welded right here. But this shape goes back to about 700 AD. And the myth, and I don't know where's the myth or what, it makes sense, and I'm not going to vouch for it, but I always saw these axes and I thought, well, that's a neat way to save metal by making it like that. But the archaeologists and collectors and so on in Europe say these are a utilitarian axe that was also used for a battle axe, a war axe. Just about in the Scandinavian culture, just about every man, woman, and child had an axe, a hatchet, like this. And the myth is, or whatever, is that, and it's probably true, is that they fought in pairs. Sometimes, if a village was attacked or whatever, the wife was the axe person, or a child or a teenager or whatever, and that the man was the spear carrier. And the idea was to run into battle, and these guys had wooden shields. Both sides had wooden shields. And you took this axe and you hooked it over the guy's shield and pulled it down and away, and the lancer came over and got him. It was a way of pulling the shield away. It's a wrench is the best way to phrase it. I think that would work, but I don't think there's a whole lot of evidence of it. Yeah, at least half of them.
It's on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah, it's on YouTube somewhere. But it does make sense. But it was a very important shape across Germany, France, and so on that came in so-called bearded axe. And they were, and it makes sense too, that everybody had these things and they were ready for battle, or you went out and cut kindling to cook supper. It's a very versatile tool. Now, at this stage, are there any questions that you have about, you know, the Bronze Age, these tools, or anything I've said? We'll take questions now, and then I'll demonstrate it, and then we'll break up, and you can try it if you want to. Any?
Doc, where were they extracting the ore, you know,
Okay.
for the iron? You know, if it came out of the Roman Empire, were they getting that out of Italy, or were they bringing that in from somewhere?
No, they were getting it in all across Europe. There were iron deposits. Now, the interesting thing is that in the Scandinavian country, the ore was quite different. And it was called bog iron. And a layer of highly ferrous mineral. It was really not pure hematite. Hematite is pure iron ore. Limonite is a yellow to dark brown mineral, and you could pull it up in sheets and layers and bogs, and that's what the Scandinavians used. And it was, you can almost scratch it with your fingernail. And I have some axes, finish axes, Billness Rux axes brand, that are made with bog iron and Eskilstuna steel. And the steel is just a tiny slice that's held by the wrought iron, the bog iron. But it's real, it doesn't rust easily, and it's really, really soft. It's easy to dent the iron, and the steel otherwise is very hard. I mentioned Eskilstuna, you should know, and this is not Bronze Age, this is Viking, but when they would hit the coast, they had the warriors and they had the warships, but there was a big barge that they anchored out in deep water, and the boats you see with the dragon heads on them and so on were amphibious boats that they could run right into the surf and even run them up on the beach. And in 3 minutes, they could be fully armored and on their horses and riding. The horses were in there with them. You don't see that much in the movies, but the horses were in the boats with them, 1 horse per man. The shields were on the side of the ship, and they had their axes and spears and all that kind of stuff. So they were amphibious assault that was very effective, very fast, and surprise. But one of the objectives of the Vikings was to capture, run inland to the first village or whatever, and every village had a blacksmith. They captured those blacksmiths, took their wives, children, aunts, uncles, extended family, went back out to the main loot barge, the big ship, and put them there. They took them all over to Eskilstuna, Sweden. And that's where metallurgy that we know today, of the additions to iron and so on, really developed the Viking steel. And it's just like our steel today. The Viking swords and so on in the late period, say 1000 AD, I mean, they were wicked weapons and hard and so on. Now back again, I'm jumping around, but back to the bronze tools. There's an archaeologist in Europe who really specializes in these axes and the hoards of them, the caches of them that they find, and she wrote her doctoral dissertation on it. Dorothy I'll think of it in a minute, Boughton, B-O-U-G-H-T-O-N, Dorothy Boughton. And I've corresponded with her and so on. But she's just interested in the changes through time and stuff, not the use like I am. These things, when they're found archaeologically in all across Europe, the socket axe and the pal staves, they show no evidence of warfare. They show no evidence of ever having hit another piece of metal or a sword or whatever. They are apparently totally utilitarian, whereas they were using spears and axes and things like that for fighting. But these things, these small bronze axes, were not weapons. They were used just for domestic use. Any question? Yes, sir.
You mentioned a couple of different times that there was extended periods of time which there was basically no advancement, no growth in knowledge, I'll say, of improving anything.
Right.
And there was different stages of that. Any theories about why that would occur?
That's my big question. That's my big question.
People
And
think-
we have the same eyes, the same ears, the same hands, the same thumbs and everything that they had. And they had the ultimate potential to develop and advance very rapidly, but they didn't. You know, why? I mean, their brain and the motor skills and all that were there. And so on.
They
But-
learned fire, stuff melts, it gets soft, you can put
Yeah,
things, they just
it's slow.
natural.
It's slow, very slow. And yet, when the Renaissance came, everything exploded. And the, you know, whatever part of culture it was, I mean, unbelievable how we advanced. And then, of course, the industrial age hit in Sheffield and Birmingham, England, and so on. And we didn't get the secret to the cast steel and the Wooten steel, the blister steel, and so on that they knew in Sheffield. That was an industrial secret. And we really didn't get it here in the States until about 1829-30. And that's when you buy a tool here and it says cast steel on it. That was a big thing. You know, it's got, that went up to about 1850, 60, that everything was marked cast steel because it was the new and improved and wonderful metal that had been developed. But the secret came from England. And then we had the Civil War, and that really expanded the technology, and everything went to mass manufacturing. Firearms and all that kind of stuff went to mass manufacturing. And by 1880, that's when we entered what's known as the New Iron Age, the expansion of the Great Plains, people going, the laying of the rails, and innovation. If you go through the patent records, which most of us have, there'll be something come up and then there's a whole flurry of patents for it. And then it becomes obsolete. And then something else pops up. It's like the transition from buggies and carriages and wagons and so on to the automobile and truck. And all that happened pretty darn fast. And the patents just cut off. You know, it may be for a particular kind of car tire rim or so whatever, or bicycles. When they developed the two-wheel bicycle like we have today, the patents exploded for, you know, bicycles, and bicycle parts, and you know, accoutrements for a bicycle, whatever. And the same thing happened with, you can take electric drills. You know, electric drills were known in the 1880s, and yet it wasn't until 1950 that we really had good, you know, power tools, portable drill, and now they're 18-volt, you know, Hitachi and Ryobi and so on. Yes, sir.
What's your theory about the Outtro sword and the steel that was used in the Outtro sword? Do you think the Saxons developed it and then the Scandinavians applied it?
Don't know. I mean, I know about the historical facts and so on, but everybody was at that time, let's pick 1000 AD. It was like the nuclear arms race. Everybody was trying to develop steel. And it wouldn't surprise me that the Saxons, developed a high-grade steel at that time.
But the Outtro sword shows up in the Scandinavian countries, not in the Saxon countries.
Yeah.
Do you believe that the forge work started in the Middle East?
A lot of stuff started in the Middle East, yes. Particularly in Turkey. Turkey was the center of a lot of innovation, and then when the Ottoman Empire spread, it spread all this technology with it. And so I think that it was kind of a melting pot of ideas, concepts, secrets of how you do this, how you make steel. But steel was the metal that paved our way to the digital age.
So did the raiders that named Rus in Russia go to Turkey as the Varangians, and they take back the forging technology of steel back to Scandinavia in the 900s?
Yeah, Kyiv was a big, in Ukraine, was a big cultural center, you might say, of the Vikings. And a lot of people don't know that, but the Vikings were way up there, and they were doing big things in what's now Ukraine. And they developed, they farmed and they did all of these kind of things. And that's probably what brought the end to the raiding and so on, is they all settled down, became domestic. And one Norwegian told me, I said, why were the Vikings so mean? And he said, have you ever been to Norway? And I said, no. And he said, well, if you go to Norway, it's nothing but ice and rocks. And he said, the only way to survive is to go take it from somebody else. And that's what they were doing. But I think all over the Baltic states, Balkans down there in Turkey, and so on, all of that technology was spreading. And like I said, once you hit the Ottoman Empire, it went wild. But Kievan Rus is amazing technology. I mean, the whole aspect of it. Because I have a reamer from there that's, it looks just like a kind of a wheelwright reamer from today, and yet it dates, 1000 AD, 1100, long in there. Any other comments, questions? Okay. When you use one of these things, you kind of sock it down like that, align it, and then hit it like that. And that thing is in there hard, tough, tight. Keep in mind that the shape of these blades that way still continue the angles that were used in the Stone Age. And that you get much thinner than this and it breaks. So it had to be like that kind of profile. They didn't swing and also the metal was limited, and so they had to use small tools. And so that's about the biggest bronze thing you would ever know, right there. And they didn't swing these things like a modern double bit axe or something with a 34, 36 inch hand. You get a shaving started like this. Yeah, you'll have to try it. So anybody that would like to...
Are you using green wood because it'll cut?
No, because...
You have to cut it when it's green, otherwise it's like trying to cut concrete.
They cut like 500,000 trees at Flag Fen to build the causeway and all the other stuff that was at Flag Fen. And all of that was green. And even the axe handles and stuff they found were worked green. So I don't know that they worked seasoned wood much. This is much easier. Green wood is a whole lot easier to work.
So you go, it's straight up and down with this, and then you wiggle this to get the
Yeah.
right angle.
Yeah.
I'm gonna touch something that's that old and made by humans.
Even in those ages, they did mortise and tenon joints. The earliest one of the, it was even Neolithic times, they were making well linings with mortise and tenon joints and various other joints. But with this chisel, I made that with this chisel.
So now you can see why I absolutely love this. Amazing amount of information. Really kind of cool to go back in time and see how did we get to this point. We think about the chisel as such a basic old tool, but it's really not. There's a lot of technology that goes into this to make it something more than just a sharp rock. And to see all of that come through is kind of fascinating. So I hope you like this. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, snide remarks, or like to just say something down below, the comments are down there. Thank you for that. But if you really want to help out this channel, think about joining these people over there. Those are some of the patrons on Patreon. They are the ones that sponsor this channel and make it so I can actually travel around and do videos like this. And if you'd like to see more videos coming out like this, then think about becoming a patron on Patreon. I'll leave links to their information down below. But I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. The only problem is Jim did such a great work on that presentation that I don't know what medal I should give him. Do I give him the gold medal or the bronze? And if you're from Milwaukee, then now you know about the bronze Fonz.